All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio, the 8 o'clock Thursday edition. I'm your host, Jake Anderson, and we have a pretty good show for you tonight. Pretty good. I'm usually too lazy to book guests, but this week we have, as promised, John Greenwald from the Black Vault. And for those of you who don't know what the Black Vault is, you're in for a real treat. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, DB. DB, how you doing?
Not bad, man. Just watching our empire crumble around us, but I'm hopeful something maybe positive will come out of it. Who knows?
Yes, the old crumbling empire. And I'm sure we'll get into that tonight. Fortunately, we can take a rare break from talking about we'll still be talking about it, but we can actually discuss, a tool to assist in either repairing the crumbled empire afterwards or assisting in the crumbling, for those of you who think we have to fast track the train wreck. But
because what's going on right now, I mean, it doesn't look to me like the empire's gonna collapse. It actually looks like it's going to contract into itself and create what I think I've brought up before, which is the scenario where it's called Fortress America. I mean, if you think Trump's southern wall is the end of it, you can imagine a northern wall as Canada continues to have its own massive problems that are coming with the death throes of the British Empire, because what we're seeing in Britain awaits for us if we don't get a hold of ourselves.
Well, yeah, and if Trump renegotiates NAFTA, that could also affect our relations with Canada as well.
It could. I mean, at any time we can, if we have to. I hate to put this out there, but we could annex them, and there's nothing they can do about it. So, if geopolitics gets crazy enough, that could happen.
So, one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight with Greenwald is FOIAs, our Freedom of Information Act requests, which are pretty, fun at the very least. It's cool that we can petition the government to release or declassify documents, stuff that, you might not have ever even suspected there were files out there for some of this stuff. But for example, this is a big name stuff.
It's got secret space program stuff in there. So if anybody doubts that we're not already in space, it's in there.
Oh, there's I think there's at least 1.5 million documents on here, if not more. We'll be going over I think he has the most complete archived database of the newest JFK files. He has an entire part of the site, a collection devoted to MK Ultra.
Did you see this stuff coming out where they're able to place George Bush there at the time of the shooting? I mean, calling in, yeah.
If I were to put my money I'd put my money on him and Lyndon Johnson and the CIA. The JFK came right out and said he wanted to scatter the CIA into the wind, and it's like you don't fuck with this.
You can't do that. We're seeing today with what Trump's doing is you're not. What you have to do is pick your battles. You know what I mean? You can't. You're not going to beat the play. You can't beat a company that has the dirt on everyone, even threatening them to release the dirt on them with the NSA. So this is an interdepartmental civil war. We've broached the subject for a long period of time. We know that the military is siding with the NSA. We know that when you see slam pieces about the military recently, that it's the deep state, aka the CIA, that's that arm of it. There's an internal war going on. We know this. If you can't see that by now, if you don't understand that Pompeo and Tom Korn, are both ex-army. They're putting in everybody is ex-military, so they're gonna try to do it soft. But if people don't want the new boss same as the old, which we can compare and contrast what I believe is happening and what's on the forefront, but we've been controlled by the military-industrial complex, but they've been given marching orders by the bankers for a long time, and now it looks like that's stopped, and they're going to be the masters of their own destiny. And I think we can understand how that can be a scary time, and maybe also one with some really good opportunity.
Well, yeah, and of course the central bankers are shitting their pants these days with the rise of cryptocurrency as well.
Absolutely.
With each new burst of Bitcoin, you have, some new prize horse from the old economic model coming out and casting aspersions on it. And it really is just starting to sound desperate at this point. And when you look at how the government, they clamp down on kratom as soon as it threatens prescription opiate profit.
I just got that, Jake.
They clamp down on Bitcoin as soon as it threatens the dollar. I mean, it's just so transparent what they're doing.
It's just, listen, if the MSM is pushing something, do the reverse. If kratom should be made illegal, buy a 55-gallon drum of it. I started using it, Jake, and you keep your head clear, and you get the painkiller of pot or opiate, but you keep your head clear. So, yeah, no wonder they're trying to make it illegal, because it's going to leave the country functional. They can't have that. Yeah, so now I understand the push for kratom to be illegal, because it leaves you functional and not a zombie.
Yeah, it's truly criminal that their criminalizations are criminal. The fact that they're trying to make this thing illegal is a crime, because it helps millions of people. It's absolutely not a threat in terms of it does not kill you. It cannot kill you because it does not act as a respiratory depressant the same way, because it does not affect it triggers similar receptors as an opiate, but it affects the delta receptors instead of the mu receptors. I've done my research. It does not do the same thing as an opiate, and because it cannot kill you, it cannot cause an overdose. Now, you would think that they would, of the two, which do you think they'd be trying to outlaw? Well, because of the bizarro universe that our government lives in, with the rise of the corporatocracy, they have to keep those profits intact. And you can rest assured that is what's behind the push to make kratom illegal. So,
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin, of course. I mean,
they talked about it today. They're gonna, now the IRS, if you're over 20K in crypto, especially, what they're doing is singling out Bitcoin. And I'm just, I've done my research, and I know Bitcoin has the name recognition, which is super important. It really is. But Ethereum's attached to Singapore's currency officially now, so the United States can't possibly block Ethereum. So I think I'm starting to get a bit more bullish on them, just because with the Asia pivot and with it being a lot more stable and tied to, what is Singapore if not the economic hub of all of Asia? I mean, to me, that's kind of exciting that they're doing that.
Those are the two I'm primarily invested in, the Bitcoin and Ethereum. I also played some penny cryptos with OMG and Nexus, because, those of you out there, you want to you missed the Bitcoin rush, you want to get rich off of cryptocurrency, put $100 down on like 10 different penny cryptos and wait and see which one takes off, because it's inevitable that there will be a spill off from Bitcoin. But yeah, so we might, I doubt we'll be talking much about Bitcoin tonight.
There's too much to go into it, especially because every day something new is coming out about who did the programming, what does the government have, what kind of power can they have, and then also keeping it inside of wallets online in the cloud, just not smart to do if you have a significant amount, especially over 10K, because anything over 10K now is supposed to be able to be taxable by the IRS. So there's a lot of things coming on the horizon, and they're going to put in legislation, ram it through. And, you know, it's like you said, Jake, it's kind of like you missed it with Bitcoin. Not really. You just got to hold on to it for a long time now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long play. And, of course, that's why they're trying to scare the shit out of people by saying it's, that they're going to clamp down on it because they want people they want to cause a scare. They're trying to manipulate the market.
There's a finite amount of coins, so if they can scare people into dumping it at the price that people right now are like, wow, 10 grand. But I mean, you know, what the sky's the limit. Honestly, it's based off consumer confidence and being able to be used worldwide. That's really what it is.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our first guest now, and I'm very honored to have this man on the show. I've been keeping track of his site for a very, very long time, and I was fortunate enough to meet him at a conference, a UFO conference, Contact in the Desert. We're going to have John Greenwald on, and John Greenwald is the owner and the proprietor of the Black Vault, which is the largest archive of decentralized or declassified documents or FOIA documents online. And we're going to bring him in now. John, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And like I said, I've been keeping track of your site for a very, very long time. In fact, I'll go so far to say that I was a fan of the Black Vault before it got super big.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been referencing your site for forever because in addition to writing articles for the Anti-Media, I run a site called the Ghost Diaries, which I'm interested in geopolitical stuff, but I also dabble in the more fringe, conspiracy paranormal side. And one of the great things about the Black Vault is it just takes all of it, and it's just like this is what we have, this is what we can drum up from the government. But you started a long time ago with this stuff, and I was reading a little bit about your background. So you started collecting these or looking into FOIA requests when you were about 15, correct?
Yeah, it was a long time ago now, but yeah, I started when I was 15 years old. Wow,
that is incredible. So what created this interest in you? I mean, you're a truth seeker. I can tell that immediately. But was it UFOs? Was it the JFK? I mean, was it what spurred you to really want to start digging into the government's secret files?
When I was 15, the biggest topic for me, interest-wise, was UFOs, and so that really was my main, drive and motivation. And so when the quick of it is, Google wasn't even really a thing back then. I mean, this was back in 1996, and now we say Googling, but at the time I was using like Alta Vista, for those computer geeks like myself out there. And at the time, you search UFO and you would come up with hundreds of thousands. Now it's like hundreds of millions. But, there was so much stuff out there. And even as a 15-year-old kid, although I was fascinated by it, I felt there was something more. And so I learned about what was called the Freedom of Information Act. And I, again, really had no idea what this was at the time. Here I am X amount of years later, and I feel I still don't exactly know the ins and outs of the Freedom of Information Act, but I just kind of taught myself how to use it, and I went after UFO information. And one thing you quickly learn is the government takes a lot of time to respond in some cases. My record is about, I think it's 14 and a half years for a document to come. And so imagine requesting something and waiting a decade and a half for it to actually come to your mailbox, right? I mean, that's insane when you really start to think about it. And it's not uncommon to wait a year, 2 years, 5 years. And so my point with this is when I was 15 and I started learning, like at this time I was waiting weeks and months, I was getting frustrated. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm getting UFO stuff periodically. I wonder what else is there. And so I just started filing FOIA requests on, you name the government secret, I've probably done something related to it, and started firing off requests. And the blackvault.com is ultimately what I created, and just modeled it after what I was looking for when I was searching on Alta Vista, but never found it. And so I just thought, look, if I'm looking for it, somebody else will. And created the Black Vault, and here we are 21 plus years later and still going at it. I just passed 1.7 million pages online, and it's quite a task.
Well, you should be immensely proud. I mean, it's a huge achievement, and the great thing about it is that it's not a finished work. Like this is a work in progress. I mean, I don't know what your ultimate goal is. If you have like a number in mind of like, I want to get 20 million documents or whatnot. But I mean, this is an especially important time in our history also to have a repository for these kinds of things. This is essentially the age of whistleblowing, of hackers, of leaks. And I want to get into WikiLeaks with you here, but you ultimately wrote a book about UFOs, correct?
Correct. Yeah, Beyond UFO Secrecy.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to check that out. I mean, that's one of my favorite issues. I am absolutely fascinated in the prospect of extraterrestrial life, but of course, when you get into the question of whether they've been here, you have a wide range of opinions and controversy over that. And so I'm always, I've gone through probably thousands of documents from your archive looking into the alien question. Where, we were at a conference together and where Richard Dolan was at too. And I really like Richard Dolan because he brings a certain air of rationality to the topic. But and where are you right now currently in terms of thinking about UFOs? I mean, what are some of the early documents you found that kind of kept your interest going, and then where are you at right now with what you think the government may be holding back?
Well, I mean, I've been at this a long time, obviously, and here's where I'm at. I mean, personally, I believe wholeheartedly there is a cover-up and a conspiracy behind the UFO phenomena, whatever it might be. I say phenomena plural because I think there are multiple aspects to whatever is going on. I do believe it's easily proven that there's a cover-up and conspiracy involving that. I can say after 21 years, and again, dealing with pretty much every government secret you can think up, UFOs has ultimately been the biggest challenge. It's been harder for me to get UFO information and pry loose those secrets than it is for me to go after, let's say, nuclear weapons components or information about biological testing on humans without their knowledge, or mind control experimentation where the CIA ended up killing one of their own agents. All of those are real documents. All of those documents are easier for me to get than it is UFO information. So what is it that is so secretive about a topic that the government says there's nothing to? They claim that it is all easily explainable, which is all one of the biggest, provable lies that the U.S. government dishes out. Now, why is that? So now it leads to then the next question. Is the UFO phenomena connected to aliens? Now, personally, I have a viewpoint, and that personal viewpoint is I really don't know. I hate to have an uneventful answer for you. I just have never seen anything, and I'm the type of person that needs to see to believe. But one thing I do when I do public speaking, not only on the radio, but I love doing lectures, and I've traveled around and, given lectures to colleges and high schools and UFO groups. And what I try and do is say, okay, look, I really don't know, but here's all the possible explanations, and you tell me what makes sense. And I go through all the government agencies, and I go through the documentation, and I go through the lies, the provable lies, and I only use evidence that the government gives me. And you can start etching off from the list all of these skeptical explanations on what the UFO phenomena is. And ultimately, you are left with one of the only ones left, which is it is connected to aliens. So does that mean that they've been here? And it's a huge, huge, huge question for me personally because, this gets away from the documents, because at this point there are no documents to say, well, why aliens would be here or, be interacting in our everyday lives or trying to stop a nuclear war, which some of us want to believe. And I mean, again, I'll give you my personal answer if you want it. It's not tied to any government document because it stops there. Because, again, the government documents prove a conspiracy. They prove a cover-up. They don't prove aliens. And if anybody tells you differently, they're either lying or making it up. And because the true government documents just don't pan out. Are there leaked government documents that may show something? Yeah, okay, sure. We can have that debate. But for me, and again, this is just a personal note, I deal with the stuff that the government literally hands me. Right. Now, I'll dispel a myth. There's always a reaction that, well, the government's not going to give you anything interesting. They're going to black it out. Let me tell you, after 21 years, that can't be farther from the truth. The Freedom of Information Act has really produced some amazing results that have convinced me there's a cover-up and conspiracy with this. And that's all because of the FOIA. So it is a tool that works. But what we don't have, again, is that irrefutable, it's aliens, and they're here in our skies, and, here's the documented proof. So it's a roundabout way to answer your question, but I just kind of wanted to lay it out what the government documents say, and then our human brain has to kind of take over and then answer the next part of it. And that is, does this prove that they are here? And if so, why would they be here?
So you mean there's not a YouTube video of the reptilians shape-shifting?
Some YouTube channels will try and claim there is. That I can tell you.
No, I'm with you, and I appreciate your answer, because I'm with you. I like proof on things, and I don't like jumping to conclusions. I'm one of these people that think 99.99% chance, of course, there's extraterrestrial life in the universe. But whether they've been here or not, I don't know. Using our fastest mechanism for travel right now, just to get to the nearest star, it would take 80,000 years. Yeah. So we're talking about an alien species traveling. You're talking about something that, first of all, is probably post-human. It's probably not even biological anymore. Agreed. So would we be able to see it? Would they be flying a big round disc? I don't know. They might be nanobots, that we wouldn't even be able to see. So I like to get more creative with thinking about how aliens would be here.
Well, you have to. And I'll throw a quick story, because this is a show in itself. But my secret other life, other than the Black Vault stuff, is I work in television production. I work as a television producer and writer. And I work for a lot of networks like History Channel, Discovery Channel. And I did a couple shows on this very topic, which literally changed my life and changed the way that I view this. And not to sound cheesy and blow it out of proportion, but it truly changed the way that I view it. And that was, I did a show for History Channel's The Universe, which is a show I'm very proud of. It was a very popular show for history. And my episode was on alien life and what would it look like. And so what I wrote, I was the writer and director of the episode, and I brought together like Dr. Michio Kaku and Dr. Seth Shostak and all these amazing people that are much smarter than I'll ever be, and created a show where we went to 5 different planets, different environments, and talked about the life forms on each. But the 5th planet was the true intelligent life, and it was the robots. And as much as that sounds like science fiction, hooey, it was amazing that the majority of the scientists that I talked to, mainstream scientists, the ones that don't talk about alien life, they don't believe that UFOs are really alien or anything like that. These are the guys that are saying when we meet aliens, it will be a robot. And I mean, and again, I'm summarizing this. I can go on for hours about it, but it was amazing to hear these guys talk about it. And I'm talking about hours and hours and hours and hours over months at a time on research for this show. And then I went on to do one for Discovery Channel about communication with aliens. And the biggest, but it was a scientific look at how are we going to communicate with an advanced race. And I posed that question again. What if they are robotic? How do we talk? And so you're absolutely right. You have to think out of the box, because we can't think about 21st century technology and that's going to bring us to the next level of, our expansion in the cosmos, because it's not. And when you talk about what Earth science has done since, the early 20th century to today, and you look how far we've gone, we have gone an amazing length when it comes to scientific advancement. But when it comes to space-time, and you think about it on a galactic scale, that 150 years, that 120 years, the last 100 years, that is a drop in the bucket. I mean, that's a fraction of a second when you're talking about cosmic time, because some of these universes, or some of the galaxies, have had millions of years of a head start. So let's just say life is rare, and it's super rare. Even a fraction of a percent, you're still going to have thousands of civilizations out there. And given they survive, if they evolve in the same pace, even slower, they're still going to be so far advanced than us. We can't even understand what the box is anymore at that point. So it's an interesting topic. I don't mean to babble on about it, but as you can tell, I'm fairly fascinated by it.
I am too. And when I get my Ghost Diaries podcast up and running, I would love to just do a full show on that question, because you get into the Drake equation, you get into the Fermi paradox, and I swear to God, I could stay up all night, every night, just reading answers to the Fermi paradox, or the Fermi paradox. I mean, I am just obsessed with that, and I'm gonna have to check out that episode of Universe. I think I've probably seen it, but that is great stuff. I want to get into probably the second biggest conspiracy. I don't know what the metrics are on it, but when you talk about UFOs, inevitably you get down to a more earthbound conspiracy with JFK. And I want to let DB get in here in a minute and ask some questions, because it kind of connects with this whole issue of a deep state operating in the United States. There was recently a giant new kind of trove of documents declassified by the government, and it kind of made a lot of headlines. And Trump kind of positioned himself in a favorable light, acting as if he was really declassifying something, when in reality the vast majority of those new JFK files, I think all but 50 of them had previously been available. But the Black Vault you released, you made like a full archive of them. What were your thoughts in general on that whole release? And was there anything revealed from it that surprised you, or that made you think about that issue in a different light?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to go back to your creating of an archive, what I did to kind of help myself and others, the National Archives, and this plays into answering your question, the National Archives, when they dumped all this data online, they did not make it searchable. Thankfully, they at least made it PDFs this time. They're notorious for doing TIFF files, TIF, which, to a geek is, that's great and all, but it's really not, to a researcher, not as helpful. So long story short, I mean, I converted over 90,000 PDF files, which is like over 200,000 pages, I think it is, I forget the exact number, into searchable PDFs, and created a search engine of all of those 90,000 files. And it came out to like 18 million search terms in this search engine that you can kind of mine through and get to the meat. Because I think, again, going back to your question, the problem with dealing with the JFK assassination, you have a couple of things at play here. Number one, you have the passage of time, right? You have so many decades now that have passed that you have a certain percentage of the planet that doesn't care anymore. I don't fit in that percentage, but sadly, that's the reality of this, is that, we hear about JFK. Yes, we know he was assassinated. Yes, we believe there was a cover-up. There's not really any proof. Okay, moving on. So now there's so many decades that have gone, and now they are burying the public with these documents. And you're right. I don't know. I think there are more than 50 documents. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly confident there's more than 50 that have never been released before. But sadly, a lot of them, you're right, were released or were released in some form. So they took some of the redactions off, and now we can read more of it. The problem is exactly what I've just said. You've gotten over 90,000 PDF files of hundreds of thousands of pages. So to go through that, you're talking about years more worth of work, especially when the National Archives dumps them all and you can't even search them. And that's where I came in to try and say, okay, let's make this actually searchable. Let's make this valuable. Let's make something here that we can mine through the data. So now, what's in it? Well, that's a tough one to answer. There's quite a few revelations, where you realize that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes that we don't hear about in the history books. Was he the only shooter? Well, I wouldn't say there's any smoking gun, pardon the pun, to say that there, was proof that he was or was not in this new trove. But I will bring up one document that I found interesting that was ironically cut off that talked about Oswald potentially being a CIA asset. And then as I think it was an interview of Richard Helms, but I could be wrong on that. But when you read through this document, you start seeing that Oswald was, potentially a CIA asset or was working for the government. I don't know. And the reason why I don't know is because the document cuts off after that. And so you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. This isn't some lunatic that just found his way to the, book depository and fired a couple shots and killed the president and called it a day. I mean, he's obviously got ties much deeper than what we're led to believe. So when you look at documents that come out like that, you're looking for the needle in a stack of needles that's really going to help us understand what happened. But at least they're giving us the needles at this point, and now it's up to us to kind of sift through this. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it will take years to really, truly mine some of this stuff because, yeah, some of it may have been released before, some of it may have been more heavily redacted, but it still needs to be gone through and it still needs to be sifted through. My closing thought, though, on it is it's sad that it's only a headline for like a day. And then after that, we're back to sexual assault allegations or, what's Kardashian wearing or who's getting married or, and that's really kind of what we see. When valuable history like this is being released, we need to look at it because it really helps us understand everything else that's going on. We really do live in a very interesting time, and we have to look back at the past to truly understand what's going on. Because we start posing questions, especially today, about what the government is or isn't doing. And we think it's crazy, right? And we go, oh, well, they can't be doing that because there's no way they would. But when you look back 4 or 5 decades and you realize they've done it before, right, then you realize, okay, well, that's a lot more plausible. And that's the history that we need. And that was a lesson I taught myself and kind of learned by accident when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, going through high school and like literally filing like 20 or 30 FOIA requests a day to every government agency, is I realized that even though UFOs were not connected to the JFK assassination and the JFK assassination was not connected to MK Ultra, well, I mean, you can argue maybe it was, but anyway, those three are not really connected. But when you start looking at the documents, you realize, yeah, they are. And it helps you understand the next. And it makes you realize what the government is truly, truly capable of. And I do believe that there was a cover-up behind JFK. I don't believe Oswald acted alone. And that brings up another document where Ruby, that there was a tip to the FBI years after the assassination that Ruby had tipped somebody off, hey, you better watch what happens at Dealey Plaza and watch the fireworks, which meant that it was a conspiracy in the sense that there were more than one, person involved. That document had been released in a different form before, but again, it's still something that needs to be looked at and is adding more pieces to the puzzle.
Awesome. Well, I do ultimately want to get into MK Ultra a little bit. By the way, if you're just joining us, I have John Greenwald from the Black Vault joining us, as I like to call you, the King of FOIAs. And,
Thank you. I've been called a lot worse.
And so to that point, DB, do you have a question you want to jump in or talk about any questions you might have, how it relates, how JFK relates to some deeper issue or anything else like that?
I actually, haven't had a chance to sift through the massive amount of data. I'm sure probably you may be the only person that's gotten a look at everything you have on there, but as far as UFOs pertain, anything new or anything to report on as far as Majestic 12, because I've always been fascinated with the theory that the most powerful men in the world, including a guy named Zbigniew Brzezinski, who just died, signed this document. And was it real? And does it still pertain to today's skunk work technology and stuff like that?
Yeah, a good friend of mine who I've known for now over 20 years is Stanton Friedman, and he has obviously, done a lot more research than I have on this. So I would not try and, lie to you and give you a better answer than he probably could. What I did do, and I talked to him a lot behind the scenes about it, was instead of trying to authenticate the MJ-12 documents themselves, he did this in a different way while he was writing his books. I went after the FBI files of all of the MJ-12 alleged members, and then even went to some of the, you have the original MJ-12 documents, and then you have like this huge trove of, other document dumps through the year that Dr. Bob Wood has, and his son Ryan Wood, who at Majestic Documents, they did quite a bit of research on. And so I took all those names that were connected to Majestic 12 and went after their FBI files. And so again, no mention of aliens or UFOs, just, again, going after FBI files, because I've amassed thousands and thousands of pages of FBI files alone just to kind of keep that historical record. And to my surprise, nearly all of them, when it comes to Majestic 12 and the alleged members, their files have been destroyed in one way or another. And it was like, did I get some of them? Yes. And you can actually, if you search the Black Vault, there's a page called the FBI Files, the Paranormal Collection. And so in the Paranormal Collection, there's a section for MJ-12. And a lot of them, again, had portions or all of their files destroyed. Now, that happens, sadly, which is why I do what I do, partially, because I want to archive everything. So I won't say that like the MJ-12 guys are the only ones I've ever seen destroyed, because that's not true. But I did find that the vast majority of them were destroyed or partially destroyed. And that to me is very intriguing, because, when you do research like this and you see enough files, one or two here and there scattered around with no real pattern is kind of what you find. When you go after MJ-12 stuff and then you see a lot of them are they have files, but again, partially destroyed or all destroyed. When you look at that, you realize, okay, well, maybe there is something going on here with these guys. Maybe they were involved in some secret group. I don't know. So I know that doesn't really definitively answer your question, but I bring it up because it is a unique way to look at it. And again, Stanton, when I told him, what I was doing, and then ultimately showed him the results, because I did get the results for everybody now, I think he was surprised to see that, and surprised to see that the government does destroy these files, and they shouldn't. Regardless of if they're connected to MJ-12 or not, it doesn't matter. I think that a lot of this history is getting lost, and we're forgetting about some of the stuff the government has or possibly has not done. And so I try and archive it all. And so if you go on there, again, the Paranormal Collection, it'll break down every member with pictures and their names, Twining, Vandenberg, Menzel, Hunsaker, everybody, and then goes into their FBI files. Some have them partially destroyed, others are entirely destroyed.
And it's ironic because it's like when they do that kind of redaction, you're like, okay, well, you're in a sense, you're telling us there was plenty to hide.
Exactly. And there's, in my opinion, especially in this day and age, there's no reason to destroy a government document ever. There's ways to digitize it. There's ways to archive it. I understand that is a massive amount of data, but I don't believe that in this day and age, to preserve what is truly going on, I just don't understand why we destroy anything. And over the years, I've seen quite a bit. I'll give you a quick example with a UFO case. And I filed a request about the Japanese Airlines, a real famous UFO case, JAL, I think it's, 1928, the UFO, 1628, forgive me, where Japanese Airlines flight pilot saw a UFO outside of his aircraft. This was back in 1986. And so I filed a FOIA request to the FAA about this quite a few years ago and requested any information on this particular incident. Again, it's Japan Airlines Flight 1628. And they had allegedly sent me a letter, okay? And they I stopped hearing from them, but they claimed that they sent me a letter. I did a follow-up like a year later, and they said, well, we're sorry, all of those documents have now been destroyed. You didn't answer this letter. And they sent me the letter they allegedly sent me. And they, after I waited for a response, they said, we found records pertaining to your request. We're going to ask, in order for us to send these to you, that you withdraw your FOIA request. You withdraw it, and we'll just go ahead and send you these documents. Now, I've done over 7,500 FOIA requests. That doesn't even count the follow-up letters I've had to do. So almost all of them receives at least 1, 2, 3, or 4, follow-up letters. So we're talking about over 10,000 letters that I've sent. I have never seen an agency request that I withdraw a FOIA in order to send me documents. Why? Because the whole point of the FOIA is to get them to send you documents. Nothing makes sense. The last sentence, or one of the last sentences in this, says if we don't hear from you within 30 days, the documents are going to be destroyed. Now, there's no reason for my letter to all of a sudden spark them to destroy these documents, and yet it did. And I never got that letter. For the life of me, I searched everywhere. And I'm not OCD officially, but I'm pretty OCD when it comes to archiving. I mean, I have saved every piece of paper I think my wife wants to strangle me that the government has ever sent me. And I have filing cabinets and document boxes and you name it. And I've never found that letter that they claim they sent me, and they destroyed the records. Gone for good. Never been able to get them.
Was the letter document sent certified so that you can backtrack it at all?
Other than the photocopy they sent me and with the date at the top, no, it was never registered or certified, and there was no proof ever.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And under the FOIA, they're not obligated to answer any questions either. And so there's really nothing I can do, like challenge them, like, hey, you guys never did this, because the documents are gone. They're destroyed. And so that's truly, why again, it's one of the million reasons why I do it, but that's really to the heart of why I do it. Because you look at just that story, right? And Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a well-known UFO case, been around for a long time in the field, meaning people have talked about it. These documents could have proven something. And there was no reason that my FOIA should have sparked like, hey, look what we have. We should shred them. Why would the FAA think that? And yet that's what they did. Those letters I do have, meaning I archived everything. And again, that's in the Black Vault. I've got that. So if you search for that Japan Airlines flight, you'll come up with my story. And I kind of wrote it up. And, I've got, I could bore you guys to death with stories like that for hours. And you realize that there's no reason for them to do that. There is proof that there is a cover-up when it comes to UFOs. Why are they doing it? I wish I knew. I have no idea. That's up for the public to really determine. All I can say with the blackvault.com documents and stuff that I archive, I just put the evidence out there and let the public decide. And you guys figure out what this means to you, because everybody has a different interpretation.
Before you go, I want to have you quickly explain to someone out there who may want to file a FOIA the easiest way to do it. I'm going to have to enlist your help at some point, because at some point on the Black Vault you had an article about the Elisa Lam case, and I'm interested in that because I'm making a documentary about it. And this was a very mysterious case, and it's just a single person. But it's just one of these mysteries that just keep growing and growing and growing. So at some point, I'm going to have to enlist your help on that one. But yeah. I do want people to know how to do this, because, we're just skimming the surface here. There are a billion conspiracies out there. What is one that really just knocked your socks off? Like what's a FOIA request or a subsequent file you received that really just blew your mind?
UFO related?
No, anything.
Well, I think one of the ones that blew my mind was UFO related. So if you don't mind me sticking with UFOs,
I love it.
So I'll summarize the story, because it's a research section of my life that spanned about 2.5 years. But to summarize it very quickly is I found black and white irrefutable proof that the United States Air Force was still collecting UFO records and UFO reports from their pilots. I found it was called Air Force Manual 10-206, and it literally had in black and white unidentified flying objects. Now, why is this key? Well, that's the same exact agency that wants to tell you that they have no interest in UFOs, and they did their investigation that ended in 1969 with Project Blue Book, and they moved on, that they weren't interested since then. And yet here's a manual that I found. At the time, it was like dated 2008, 2009, that was still on the books, and it showed unidentified flying objects, word for word, letter for letter, and that all United States Air Force pilots were mandated and required to follow it, and they were supposed to report any UFOs that they see. Now, speeding up the story, where do the reports go? They go to NORAD. Now, I filed a FOIA request to the NORAD installation to try and figure out, okay, well, are there 100 reports, 1,000, 10,000? How many reports? And NORAD responded to me, and they said, we are what's called a binational command. We're under the command of both America, and the United States, and Canada. So consequently, we are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Now, how convenient, right? I mean, there's only two places that I know of in the federal government and the military that's not subject to the FOIA. And one of them is NORAD. The other one is the White House. And so I thought, well, great, and it took me a year to realize that maybe the Canadian government, they'll answer under their equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act, which in Canada is called the Access to Information Act. And I called the guy on the telephone at the Department of National Defense. That's kind of the Canadian equivalent to our Department of Defense. And he had no idea who I was. This was not a UFO office. The types of reports that detailed UFOs were called CIRVIS, CIRVIS. It's an acronym and it stands for Communication Instructions for Reporting Vital Intelligence Sightings. And yes, acronyms get very confusing, which is part of the challenge. So anyway, when I called this guy on the telephone, he answered. I asked, could a U.S. citizen request information? And he kind of hummed and hawed, and he says, well, I don't see why not. And so I said, well, what I'm looking for, sir, are these reports are called service reports. Before I ever was able to define what the acronym stood for, he says, oh, yeah, I've got them right here. And he had them within arm's reach. And so why he had these UFO service reports on his desk, I have no idea. I was able to get them. Now, these are important because NORAD told me in the same letter that they say we're not subject to the FOIA. They said in good faith we searched anyway, and we found nothing. So sorry, we haven't collected a single UFO report or service report. When I asked Canada, Canada gave me a handful of them. And so it proved that the government was lying through their teeth, and all I needed was the Canadian government's word. And so as time went on, journalists asked me the very question you just did. What's one of the most, amazing documents? So I gave them 5, and this was one of them. And he called the Pentagon, Lee Spiegel of the Huffington Post, and he called the Pentagon. No response, left a message. But he wanted a response like, hey, why do you guys have this manual? You're clearly receiving UFO reports. And so no response. 48 hours, Lee Spiegel called me. It was late on a Friday night. And he says, you're not going to believe this. And he went back to a web address that I was able to prove to him that this document was real on an Air Force server. Real confusing to learn some of these military servers. But I showed him, where to get it. And he goes back on that Friday night to finish his story because the Pentagon never called him back. Chapter 5 in Air Force Manual 10-206 was all about UFOs and how to report them, where to report them, so on and so forth. Chapter 5 was completely removed. And he called me and told me that, and I said, there's no way. You clicked on the wrong thing. You're on the wrong page. I got home that night. I checked, and sure enough, within 48 hours of the media asking, how did John get this? Why do you guys have it? And what UFO reports are there? They completely changed the manual and then called Lee Spiegel back and pretty much claimed it was a coincidence. Wow. So what's the likelihood of all of that happening? NORAD just accidentally doesn't find the records. They're not lying. They're telling the truth. The Canadian government accidentally has them on their desk. The United States Air Force completely rewrites one of their manuals within 48 hours of a major mainstream outlet asking a question because it finally was going to put the spotlight on proof that they were interested in UFOs. And my closing thought on that particular story is I can prove a paper trail that the United States Air Force actually edited that very document multiple times, and they never took UFOs out. And it wasn't until somebody asked a question from the media that they went, oh, crap, we better take this out, and they rewrote the whole thing. So That, to me, is all the proof you need. I mean, I could show you thousands of other pages, but that, to me, is all the proof you need that they will do anything to cover it up and cover up the public understanding what truly is going on. What they say at a press podium is completely different than the documents. Sorry to blabber on that.
No, they are just so obsessed with denying this, and it's like, you brought up earlier the connection between whether there was a connection between nuclear weapons and UFOs, and oddly there is, because so many of the UFO sightings happen to occur at nuclear facilities or military weapons facilities. And it's just like, what are they hiding? It's like, if they're not, I mean, look, it's either they're hiding like advanced drone technology, a more practical response to the UFO question would be, okay, look, they're covering up advanced weapons technology, but they're covering something up. And in the meantime, they're feeding this vast conspiracy that some would argue acts as a cover for other conspiracies. I mean, the UFO conspiracy really, it's like the dark matter. It collects all of the light from all of these strange conspiracies, and leaves the real questions, or not the real questions, but it leaves other questions in the dark, because so many people attribute these nefarious conspiracies to being alien life, when really these could just be like advanced weapons systems. Mm-hmm. Have you found anything or any of the files you've gotten? Have they touched light on this, on like what they could be hiding?
No, and again, it's debatable on what they're hiding. In my personal opinion, just throwing it out there, I think one of the biggest possible explanations for this is that the United States government has no idea. And I truly think that we have to realize that there really is no cover up because there's collusion between extraterrestrials and America. We have to take into consideration that they don't have advanced alien technology because they captured it, or they made a deal, or Eisenhower shook hands on some faraway runway. I think we have to come to I think we have to consider the possibility that the government has no idea, that they don't know what this phenomena is, that It can come and go as it pleases, that it is so far more advanced than us that we can't fight it, we can't communicate with it, we can't understand it, we can't comprehend it. And if the United States government comes out, and this plays into what I believe is the motive for the cover-up, if the United States government comes out and says to their people, we are no longer number one, that in itself is the biggest national security risk to all of the planet. Because now you realize that the strongest nation on earth, the most powerful, I'm sorry, I love where I live. I take a lot of pride in it. There's a lot of problems, sure, and I've gone after a lot of really crappy things the government has done, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud to be an American. I won't sing it for you, but I truly, am. And I also believe if they came out and said, you know what, that safety and that security that you guys have learned to love, you don't have it anymore. Because we're here to tell you that we have no idea what this phenomena is, and if it wants to destroy us, it actually can, because we can't fight it. So I think that lack of them knowing is the biggest possibility in my mind. I don't have evidence to back that up. That's just a personal opinion. Yeah. But I think that we have to handle that possibility. And I said that on George Norrie's television show one time and got like hate mail, like heated hate mail, because people want to believe that aliens are here to help us.
It's a religion for believers.
Yeah, it is. It really, and it's scary because, you know, I mean, let's face it. This is the biggest unanswered question for me. And again, I know this is a different show, so I won't babble on about it. But the biggest unanswered question for me is if they can travel the cosmos, right? I believe that they're out there. But if they can travel the cosmos and they come here and they see that we're here, would they ever care to even stop? And I don't believe that they would. Now, again, I can babble on why, but just to kind of quickly answer my own question is I don't think they would care. I mean, how...
Well, we're beautiful butterflies.
That's right. That's what a lot of people want to think. And that's great and beautiful and puppies and rainbows and unicorns. But to you know, an advanced civilization, I mean, let's face it. Do I march out or do we march out and go out into the middle of the Sahara Desert and take an American flag and plant it on a red anthill and we say, we're humans, we come in peace, let's share knowledge, right? We don't do that. We might look and study if you're fascinated by that, and I love ants, so I would be one of those geeks. But, I mean, for the most part, we don't care. What do? We stomp over the anthill, right? We pave it over so we can build a bigger skyscraper. And I think that when you deal with alien life, the intelligence gap between us and that anthill in the middle of the Sahara Desert is going to be closer than it would be between humanity and alien civilization with 1.5 million year head start, right? And that's being conservative. So I think that we really have to take that into consideration, and we have to step out of our shells and realize, okay, we're not as great as we think we are. And if, you know, the idiot world leaders who want to try and, you know, talk about nuclear war and, you know, slinging nukes at each other, yeah, that really sucks for us humans. But to an alien, I'm sorry, those are pop rocks. You know, I mean, do you really think that that's going to, you know, harm the galactic cosmos that we have a nuclear weapon? I truly don't think so. I really honestly don't.
Oh, we're up against the clock here, unfortunately. John, I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Sorry to babble there.
Everyone, and go to theblackbolt.com and look up.
Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.